Hey guys, it's Penzic with Reaper Airsoft. Today we're going to show you how to solder DIN connectors onto your battery itself. Um, so what you're going to need, a couple things. Something to strip the wire, something to cut the wire, your DIN connectors themselves, your battery, and then your soldering iron and your solder. Now, you've got to be careful doing these because if you short out, in this case, one of the Elite Force 7.4 LiPos, you can short these out extremely easy. If you cross the leads or anything like that at all, you can burn them up. These things catch fire extremely easy. Not extremely easy, but if you short them out, if you connect the positive to the negative and just let it go, you can fry this battery and they can catch on fire. If you do this the smart way, the correct way, you will have no issues and your battery will last for a very, very long time. So a couple things to think about before you start doing any of this is make sure you have the proper tools. If you do not know how to solder, please practice a little bit on some normal wire real quick. That way you don't have any issues. And make sure you have shrink tube to cover your connections when you're done. Do not use electrical tape or anything like that. Don't solder both connections together and then leave them there uncovered. You will short your battery out eventually, I promise. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the female side of the DINs. So when you get a set of DINs, your male side is going to have the long prongs on each side. Female side will have your female recesses for it. Slides together just like that. You get better connections. DIN connectors reduce the amount of resistance in each connection, and it can actually increase your rate of fire. So, first thing I like to do, I've got my soldering iron here. I've already got it heated up, it's warmed up. I've got my little stand with the prongs to hold it. This thing is definitely a bonus. If you do not have a stand or anything to hold it, you can pick these up at Walmart. If Radio Shack still exists, they sell them, but it's a great thing to have. So what we're going to do, we're going to clean off my iron real quick, get all the old solder off, all the crappy stuff. If you do not have solder with flux in it, so this one's a rosin core solder, so it's got the rosin flux and everything in it. You're going to want to get some flux that comes in tubes, and what it does is it actually cleans the wire, cleans the connection points, and everything else. So what I like to do is apply some heat, touch the solder to it, start letting it heat up. I pre-tin both my positive and negative connection on the DINs, that way I have some solder on there. It's ready to go. The rosin core cleans the connection, and I know I'll have a clean connection when I go to solder it to itself. For the wire side, I always like to cut my negative first, so I'll cut just the negative. So on this one we don't need the wire super long, so the negative's cut. I don't mess with the positive yet, that way I have nothing that it won't ground out, it can't ground out, it won't touch itself. So we'll be good to go there. I strip a little bit off the end of the wire to expose it. I give the wire a twist, make sure all the individual strands are together. I'll use my other side of the clamp here, get it close, and what we're going to do is we're going to tin the wire itself. Now with the wire, you don't want to hold heat to the battery a lot or for a long time. So what I do is I actually throw flux on the tip of the soldering iron itself to get it ready to go. That way there's some there. I touch that bead of solder to the wire itself. That way it starts heating up the water. There is some wire, there is some solder there. And then I add some more solder to the connection itself. Doesn't take long. As you can see, I've got solder all the way around that connection. I've got a little extra bubble to make sure that I've got extra solder that's needed. I slip a black piece of shrink tube over that connection itself, over that wire, put it down towards the base, hold all the other wires back out of the way, and then what we're going to do is basically we're going to clean one more time, make sure no old solder on there. We're going to come in, touch that negative to the contact. When you're looking at the back side of the actual DIN connector, some of them are marked, but your flat top, this is going to be positive. Your top of your T itself is going to be your positive. The bottom of the T is going to be the negative. So we're going to put the wire in place. We're going to put everything right there. We're going to touch the T itself We're going to start getting that warmed up. Then we're going to come over to the wire itself. We're going to touch it, let it melt, let it stick together, hold it. Let it cool off a little bit. Once it cools off enough, we're going to slide the shrink tube up, put it in place, hit it with a lighter real quick. So there's one wire already down, ready to go. That's all insulated. It's not going to short. We're going to go back to the positive side now. We're going to line up the positive to where we cut the negative. We're going to cut the positive to the same length. This you can leave the way it is. You can throw this on with your other connector if you want it to make an adapter. So if you had a deaned battery that needed to go to a non-deaned gun, you would have an adapter that would go to a non-deaned gun. So you can make an adapter out of the wire you cut, which is why I always like to leave some wire hanging over extra there. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to strip this about the same length. You don't need a ton of wire hanging, roughly about 1/4 inch. Give it a twist, throw it in our clamp, and then we're going to tin that one. So like before, we're going to throw some solder right on a tip. You give this a turn so I have it upright a little bit, and then we're going to apply solder, let it start warming up, and we're going to add some more solder, make sure it goes all the way around. Real quick, you don't want to be touching the contact or the wire for a very long time, because what will happen is you can short out the battery due to the heat. It can mess with the battery. So you don't want to get it super hot. You don't want to be sitting there forever on it and overheating everything. So through positive shrink tube, we've got our red shrink tube for our positive on that side. Now we're going to connect the other side here. Let me see if I can turn this so you guys can see it a little bit better. I'll turn it this way. We'll rotate that way you guys can see it a little bit better. I'm going to throw a little more solder on the contact on this side here just to make sure. And I'm going to try and do this without getting in the way of the camera, but no promises, guys. Okay, so we got it in place. We're going to start heating up the contact point, bring in the wire, heat up the wire, let everything melt together, hold it, let it cool down for a second. That way the solder sets. We've got a solid connection. We're going to slide the shrink tube up and around the connection point itself. Heat it up with the lighter real fast. Close the shrink tube off. And there you have it. That is a deaned battery. The battery itself stayed cold. The wires aren't really hot. If you get to the point where you're touching a wire or you're holding the wire itself and the wire is extremely hot, then you are holding this way too long. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make an adapter. Like I said, these are always great, especially for charging. If you have a standard smart charger or whatever that has just a small to me connector, you can still charge without changing the charger itself. I like to change the charger to the Deans myself personally, but it's always nice to have the adapter as well. That way if you're charging your buddy's gun or your gun or anybody else's gun, or sorry, the batteries at least, you have an adapter to go back and forth either way. So on this one, since we have no battery hooked up to it, no power hooked up to it, you can actually take it, strip both of them at once, twist the wires. We're gonna tin both of these connectors, both of these wires at least. We're gonna get it set up, add some solder, get it tinned. Alright, we're done with that connection. We're going to bring our Dean connector in. Give it a little flip here, that way it's the side I like. And then we're going to do the same thing that we did for the battery. We're going to tin that connection and that connection right there. Like I said, you don't want to be touching these forever if they get too hot. On the connector itself, if it gets too hot, you can actually shift the pins, the actual pieces of metal, because it'll start melting the plastic. And if it's all out of whack, it's not going to line up right. You're never going to get your connector together. So we're going to do the negative first. Get hot enough. Alright. I let it slip. Sorry, guys. Throw some more solder up there. That way we got a good bead. And then I'm going to need to throw a new piece of shrink tube on. This one started closing off early because I had too much heat there. And that's what happens. On this side, you don't have to watch it as much. On the battery side, you definitely have to watch it. Because, like I said, you can cook the battery. So, get that out of the way. Heat it up. Come in. Touch it. Good to go. Slide that forward. And it's already starting to shrink. We're going to heat it up, torch it real quick. Then we're going to flip it over. We're going to do the positive. Now, like I said, remember, when you got to do this, if it gets too hot, give it a chance to cool down. And you don't want to melt anything, so slide the positive shrink tube on. Get the wire out of my way. We're going to hit it real quick. Get it locked into place. Slide the shrink tube up. Hit it with a lighter. Everything's locked in and we have an adapter made. So if that helped you guys, give me a like, thumbs up, subscribe, share please. If not, give me a thumbs down, and thanks for watching.